Yes, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this webinar today. As was said, I'm Lisa Rajan. I'm an author with Big Cat. And Collins asked me to do this webinar to talk about ways to boost the presence of STEM in the primary classroom as a way, hopefully, of encouraging more children towards STEM, more STEM careers. The reason they've asked me to do it is, as you just heard, I write the Tarabins Books, which are about children trying out different STEM jobs and having a really fun and exciting time while they're doing so. There are currently 18 different STEM career books that I've written to date. Some of them are very obviously STEM, so scientist, coder or technology, engineer and doctor. And others are a bit more what I call STEM by stealth. So there's forensic science in the detective book, there's microbiology in the gardener book, marine biology in the diver book. I've just pulled out a little bit of the plot line for a couple of them. So in the mountain ranger book, it's actually about climate scientists, and it's got some conservation in there too. And the diver book, again, as I said, is really marine biology. I also write the Dani Binns books. Dani is Tara's younger sister. I've written 12 of them, and Dani tackles more traditional jobs that younger children tend to have heard of. Things like farmer, dentist, police officer, train driver. But there's still science in the Dani Binns book, sort of, really quite basic stuff that matches the early years foundation scheme as we use here in the UK, and also the Key Stage 1 national curriculum, again here in the UK. But I imagine there are definitely some parallels with the curriculum, wherever you are. And I actually start with these guidelines or curricula when I plan out each book. I decide which sort of slightly sciencey thing I'm going to touch on, so that hopefully the books integrate with and reinforce things that the child is learning elsewhere during the school day. So, for example, I cover measurement in the builder one, forces in the firefighter one, pressure and temperature in the plumber one, and safety and being healthy in the paramedic book. The most recent Tara Binns books that I've written have been I've tried to make them particularly forward-looking career-wise. I'm really trying to reflect the future that children are going to experience, and touch on themes that are, very sort of forward-thinking, but are everyday to them. So things like plastic biodegradation, renewable energy, robotics, AI, biodiversity, maglev, so magnetic levitation, and of course volcanoes, because volcanoes. And hopefully mirroring or reinforcing topics that children, sort of Key Stage 2 here, but 7 to 11-year-olds. So mirroring things they've come across elsewhere, helps make these things more familiar and more interesting. And of course, lots of kids have toy robots at home, or even drones nowadays, or they watch nature programs, or they have sustainability week, or they're on an eco council. So all sorts of other things going on around them that are very similar to the themes in these books. I thought I should probably say a bit about why I think it's important to get kids, and in my view, particularly girls, interested in STEM. Obviously, not all of them want to have a career in STEM, but STEM creeps into most jobs nowadays. Almost everything has a degree of technology or automation or digital or science or health or something, you know, some aspect to it. Retail jobs involve technology, office jobs involve email or a web-based, you know, we're all online for Zoom and have been for ages. But anything that involves manufacture or logistics or delivery, you know, it's everywhere, isn't it? So I think a basic understanding of particularly technology, but also other things, is really, really important. And even if you don't work at all, you know, you still have a phone, you still have devices, your own personal computers and everything. Let's face it, more and more things are done on those. So, and I'm very aware that I talk about jobs and work in the Tara and Dani Binns books as if it's a concept that children think about. And of course they don't. You know, maybe a passing thought about, you know, when I grow up, I want to be a train driver or whatever. But until they're asked, it's not really something they think about a lot. And they certainly don't think about what might be the technology content of the job I do. So I think we have to have their backs on this, because we do have at least some idea of what the future looks like. I think if children think about science at all, which on the whole they don't, they think about it in terms of facts or knowledge, or why something happens, or, you know, how things work. But equally important is the skill side of it, which of course children don't see and don't get the importance of. And the skills they get from studying science for as long as is possible are really useful for life, for social interactions. So keeping them interested in science subjects, and connecting science to other aspects of their lives has huge benefits for their basic life skills and people skills and being healthier, etc. You know, things like critical thinking and prediction, analysis, inference, communication, working together with other people, even things like the value of success and failure, understanding cause and effect, how to interpret what you see, and there are I think there are obviously real benefits from, you know, obviously understanding how the world works, but also how to make deductions, and how to make decisions that affect your own life. You know, from decisions at individual level about, you know, the relationship between drinking too many fizzy drinks and having to go to the dentist, or fillings. Decisions at societal level about things like screen time, and health and the psychological effects, and, you know, online bullying, or people's online behavior. And they also, it also helps at a global level, particularly when it comes to some of these enormous challenges that affect everybody on the planet, like COVID and climate change. I think if you understood a little bit about viruses and disease, it was a little bit easier to stomach those huge behavioural changes that we all were expected to adopt overnight, you know, about staying indoors, you know, staying 2 meters apart, wearing masks, that sort of thing. And if you understood, if you understood a bit about global warming and fossil fuels, and carbon, then it's easier to make adjustments, you know, that reduce your carbon footprint, like, you know, electric cars, you know, turning the heating down, taking fewer flights, etc. So STEM has a lot to offer, and a vital role to play in making good humans, but it can feel complicated or difficult or pointless or boring to children. So I was intending to try and use the rest of this presentation to give just a few ideas of how you might want to put STEM at the heart of school and learning, and hopefully make it fun and interesting and exciting, and maybe viewed in a slightly different light by children. And obviously different types of activity or approach spark interest in different children, and of course in you as educators. I sometimes think the best place to start with children is the things they're already familiar with, both at home and at school. And sometimes all you really need to do is encourage them to look at the things around them with fresh eyes, or just with a slightly different or questioning perspective. For example, for kids into Lego, why do the blocks stay together when you want them to, but then pull apart very easily? For kids into football, which there are a few at the moment, like how can you score a goal directly from a corner kick? Like how and why does the ball curve around like that to go from the corner into the goal? For kids into music, why do some notes sound nice together and others really jar and sound awful? For kids into computer games, things like Minecraft, for example, why do redstone blocks need to be laid in a continuous line to work? Redstone actually it reflects exactly how electrical circuits work. So if you can get kids interested from that perspective, it can spark some curiosity in other things. Back when I was at university, as was said, I did a master's degree in science communication. And one of the activities that we did as students was we had to do a why presentation. And everybody on the course had to come up with a why question, just an everyday question, and then present it to the class. And it was actually an exercise in improving your presentation skills and your explanation skills. But it was actually really, really interesting and a lot of fun. I chose to do why do we get hiccups? But there are all sorts of other things like why do we dream? Why do we sneeze? Why is the sky blue? Why do I cry when I'm sad? And it might be something that you could do as a class, sort of show and tell style, where everyone takes a turn, or once a week on a Friday, and the exercise can help with all with all kinds of things like confidence building, speaking and listening. The children could discuss it afterwards, and just sort of encouraging a bit of curiosity about everyday things that we all take for granted. Like why do planes fly, or why do giraffes have long necks, or why well, that's a how, isn't it? How does the internet work? Or why do sweets taste sweet? And I think lots of children, particularly girls, don't see themselves as sciencey or mathsy, but they do see themselves as imaginative and creative, and good at communicating and working together. So making that link between STEM and these other strengths via classroom activities can be another way to elevate STEM and maybe change children's perceptions about it. Like activities where children have to design something or solve a problem, especially if it's something messy or fast or lots of fun, or perhaps all three. Just as an example, my daughter's school holds this competition every year for a week called the Great Egg Drop, and it's open to every child in the school. And all you have to do is design something that would protect an egg if you dropped it from a first floor window or the fire escape, as they actually do it from. And children would bring in eggs set in jars of jelly, or in a shoebox padded out with marshmallows. And it was amazing the things that these kids were coming up with. And it was really fun. And you got a certificate if your egg survived the fall. And they did it every break and every lunchtime for a week. And the assembled crowd below would say whether or not they thought your idea would work. And nobody ever discussed the physics or the forces behind it. It was just fun. But what the kids had actually done was think about the problem, design something to solve it, predict whether or not their idea would work, test it out. So all the stages of scientific inquiry without knowing that they were actually, that was actually what they were doing. And nobody took the fun out of it by making them write it down. And, you know, it doesn't have to be eggs. It can be anything like that. You could do balloon cars and try to, you know, erase them to see whose is the fastest, or perhaps design something to protect a crisp when it's dropped or thrown. And it's just a way to, as far as you can, to just show the fun and exciting bits of science. Obviously, there'll be meat put on the bones once they get to secondary school, but for now, just fun. You could perhaps have an of the week area of the classroom, or, you know, even just a board up in one corner, which is a bit like a Hall of Fame, perhaps, and children want to get their name or their photo up on the board this week. Maybe it's something like a daily or a weekly maths challenge where pupils get credit for just attempting it, so that they, you know, change their mindsets about maths if they find that a struggle. And all you have to do is try. It doesn't matter if you get it right or if you get it wrong, as long as you have a go. It could be a science challenge. It could be a crazy invention of the week, where you come up with something, some mad invention, draw a picture of it, say how it works or what it's for. Perhaps you post up a mathsy or a sciencey joke, or have a close-up, a sort of, you know, a microscopic photo of something that they then have to identify what object it is from the photo, or a picture of something and it's who invented this, and then they have to go away and find out who did. Or perhaps it's a close-up of part of a cover of one of the sciencey books in the library or in book corner, and they have to identify which book it is. Or word searches, or dingbats, or maybe like a photo of something then made into a jigsaw puzzle, and then the pieces are jumbled up and they have to identify what the invention is or the sort of sciencey object is. You could perhaps split the class into bigger teams, where they design or invent something together as a group. So maybe like a Lego marble maze that everybody has to try and solve in the shortest amount of time. So it's a race. You know, maybe there's a prize if your team, I don't know, if you solve it the quickest or something. Or design a giant catapult or some way to get a tennis ball from, you know, one end of the playground to the other or something, and see whose goes the furthest. I mean, you know, obviously it depends on the age of the children as to the degree of complexity, but there's lots of things that could just encourage imagination, a bit of challenge, working together, troubleshooting, you know, patience, inclusion, leadership. All of these other things can be involved in the activity, and to the child it's just fun, but it doesn't, you know, and it doesn't matter if things work or not. It's just you know, putting your mind to seeing if you can do it, seeing if you can solve a problem. I think I came up with this because it's the time of year, if you celebrate Christmas, but you could combine maths with art, and perhaps make mathematical advent calendars where maybe there's a sum on the outside of the door, and the answer is inside, or maybe there's a list of sums and you work out the answer, and the answer is a number between 1 and 24, so that's the door that you open next. So it's a bit more of a sort of a treasure trail than a strict advent calendar, but it's just sort of, you know, it's the mechanic that's important. It doesn't have to be Christmassy or Adventy or anything. It doesn't have to have 24 doors, but it's quite empowering for the child to be the one that comes up with the questions and the sums for a change. And perhaps the child could make theirs and then swap with a friend, or time their friend to, you know, open the doors in the right sequence and work out which door comes next. And hopefully some aspect of it might appeal to most children, whether it's the race or making things or teamwork or writing the questions. I don't know. But if the whole class makes one each, then that's, you know, 30 different ones to swap around. Or perhaps turn that sort of treasure trail idea into a sciencey scavenger hunt that could go outside the classroom or in different areas of the school. You know, maybe they're looking for things to collect. You could tie it into material science or geology or, you know, plants and leaves and nature. And the children could examine the properties of the items that they find, or perhaps all the initial letters of the things they find add up to, you know, spell something when you put them in the right order. I don't know, or you could adapt it to whatever your topic is, you know, your humanities topic or whatever. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe it will work. Or you could perhaps take it one stage further and turn the classroom into an escape room, where everybody works together to design puzzles and codes and quiz questions. So you design, you know, this one class designs theirs, and another class gets locked in their classroom and has to try and escape in time for lunch or in time for break. And things like designing an escape room get children with very different skills working together, because you have to communicate, and somebody has to draw things, somebody has to make things, someone's got to maybe calculate something, and cross-referencing, ideas generation, hiding places, you know, all sorts of things, ways of presenting puzzles. So there's so many different creative skills involved. Another idea that might spark children's interest in STEM is weaving it into the activities you already do regularly, and just sort of add a science theme or a layer of science on top. So, you know, World Book Day, I know some schools do a book in a day, so just make it a sciencey book, or Maths Day, or, you know, I don't know, World Science Day, and everyone dresses up as a scientist, or yeah, or the science of Halloween, the science of spring, the science of Diwali. So take things that you would be doing, science of Sports Day, things that you would be doing anyway, but just look at them through a very slightly different lens. I know lots of schools do some form of sustainability week, or walk to school week, or something environmental. And I mean, I know it's not always possible cost-wise, but could children bring things in to make a bug hotel, or get bee bombs to plant a wildflower meadow, or set up a wormery, or even grow cress, like we used to do when I was a child. All these things obviously have their roots, in some cases their actual roots in science, and they make it every day, they make it beautiful, and make it interesting and rewarding. Could you have Invention Day, when everybody brings in bits and bobs from home, random bits and pieces, and then you all work together, turning it into an invention, or a collage, or junk modelling. Or perhaps there are things at home that like mechanical things that parents won't mind if you bring them in, and take them apart and have a look at what they look like inside, and then maybe use, as you know, as long as it's safe, use those bits to make a collage, or to try and build them back together and turn them into something else, a sort of Transformers style. Numbers Day, perhaps. Back when I was at school, we were learning about base 2 and binary, and this was sort of before computers even, or before everyday computers. And we all got in a line and we counted in binary by each person being a 1 or a 0 by putting their hand up or down. It was really, I didn't understand it at all, but it was weirdly fascinating, as we take base 10 for granted a lot, as if there have never been any alternatives, and yet we use base 60 for time, and the ancient Babylonians counted in base 12 using the sections of their fingers. Prime numbers, obviously, the Fibonacci sequence, numbers in nature, Roman numerals. I think there are loads of interesting things about the numbers, about numbers themselves, that aren't hardcore maths, but they link to history or humanities or geography. Numbers in music, like octaves, and waltz timing. So in dance. Yeah, so sort of numbers are everywhere. They don't have to be just in boring old maths. Perhaps spend a day being human robots, where children get into pairs and invent their own programming language. So one of them is the robot and the other one is the programmer, and they come up with their own way of conveying instructions to tell the other person what to do or where to go. You could have robot races, but you have to, you can only move forward if your partner gave you the correct instruction. And then you can perhaps compare the programming language that kids come up with existing languages like Scratch or Python, or, there are loads of them, obviously. Or compare them with other languages to see what they, what your computer robot language has in common with, linguistic languages, and could look at, do computers communicate with each other the same way people do, and sort of comparisons with translation and all that kind of thing. Perhaps the children make an invention timeline that goes around the school, and links together sort of actual objects, actual things in the school that have been invented. Perhaps you have wool tracing a route between inventions, so that if you follow the wool, it takes you from invention to invention, and it could link at actual things like, I don't know, the fluorescent lighting or carpet or plug sockets or, hinges, anything really. And the children could maybe make a little fact sticker about each invention. You could use different colour wool for inventions by women or people of colour or people from different continents. And if some of these groups are underrepresented, then the children could actively search out inventions and inventors that they may not have heard about or come across before. So it's a bit of a research activity too. Or you could do an A to Z of inventions, or put climate stripes up around the corridors. I don't know, but something with the corridors or the physical school building, if that's a possibility. Another idea to get a bit more STEM into the primary classroom is science in stories, where you take the fiction book that you're writing, the fiction book you're reading, and try to look for the science in it, and then perhaps present that science as a brand new discovery, within the context of the book. Maybe do a written piece that's a magazine article or a newspaper. Could a wolf really blow down a house? What are the forces at play there? Or how strong would his breath have to be to do it? Or could Cinderella actually dance in a glass slipper? Would it take the weight of a person dancing, or would it snap? you know, if the sky fell on Chicken Licken, like, is that really, you know, I don't know, but just sort of taking things from stories, to see if you can find science everywhere. But perhaps another creative writing based idea would be science turned on its head, or fake news science, as I call it, where pupils would take an everyday observation and then argue an alternative scientific explanation for it. So, for example, with a hot air balloon, the story would not be that hot air rises. It would be that perhaps the air above the balloon was trying to scoot out of the way, or it's not gravity that pulls the apple down. The ground is magnetic and it's attracting the apple. Or, you know, it's not thrust that takes a rocket out into space, it's the moon pulling it, or I don't know, just and they would show during the course of the exercise that they did understand the actual real scientific principle in the process of debunking it, as they would be. So they're using their imaginations to write creatively. And the reasons, you know, the new reasons could be funny or magic or crazy or completely illogical, as long as they somewhere reference the actual explanation. It could maybe be performed as a TV news item, or made into an assembly or something like that. I just wanted to mention something that's been done by a school in Winchester in southwest England, called St. Swithers. The head teacher got in touch with me back at the beginning of this term in September, and he invited me to come and visit the school, because the entire school's theme for the year was STEM. And they were trying to slot STEM in anywhere and everywhere. And they were trying to link it to as many other activities and parts of the curriculum as they could. And they were using my Tara and Dani Binns books as the frame to hang it on. And it was really, really interesting to see it done that way, making STEM the starting point, and then, hanging everything else off it. So each of the Key Stage 1 classes, so reception and years 1 and 2 here in the UK, so like 4 to 6 year olds, each class would take one Dani Binns book each half term and then structure everything around it. So one of the receptions class was doing the farmer book, one was doing the chef book, and they read the books together in class as a guided reading, but they also did a number of other activities related to that job. The chef group, they did some cooking, they did weighing and measuring ingredients. They invited a local chef to come and talk to them. They wrote their own recipes. They structured their lessons with a starter and a main course and a pudding. They looked at nutrition, food groups, healthy eating, what happens to food when you freeze it and you heat it up or you cook it. They ran a pretend restaurant with a budget, so they worked out the cost of buying all the ingredients for the meals on their menu, and then they worked out what they would have to sell them at. They looked at different food of different types of cultures, and it was this huge range of activities. And the older children, so the sort of 7 to 11 year olds at Key Stage 2, they took a similar approach to the Tarabins book. So they each had had a different book for half a term, and they would match them up with the science curriculum. So, for example, if year 3 are doing magnetism, then a year 3 class would have the inventor book, which is about magnetic gloves, magnetic jet boots. And likewise for year 5, they were doing planetary movements and orbits, and I've included orbit trajectories here. Where's my pointer? Here in the astronaut book at Sapphire Band, which is aimed at the same reading level as Year 5. So it's all matched up basically. And as I said, I look at the curriculum here in the UK, and I look for which topics are going to be covered, and then write a book for the right reading band that sort of matches it, so that hopefully teachers can tie them into other areas of the curriculum, as they've done here at St Swithins. For years 3 and above, they asked around all the parents. I know everybody does this, in case anybody did the jobs they were covering, and they filled a lot of the slots, but where they couldn't get a parent or a friend or somebody to do it, they used the Collins case studies on the Collins website, where there's lots and lots of supporting material, and these case studies ask, say, a real marine biologist or a web developer or whatever it is, what they enjoy about their jobs, what their day looks like, what they want it to be, what they liked at school. And St Swithins, actually, it's not on this slide, but they've scheduled a visit from an actual volcanologist next term, and her name is Tamsin Mather. She's actually one of the women who advised me on the technical side of writing Visionary Volcanologist, which is, and I thought it was a coincidence, but of course it's not. They saw her name in the book because she's credited with being one of the reviewers, and she I was put in touch with her via this group called WISE, which is, again, here in the UK, a group called Women in Science and Engineering. And they endorse all my books and supply reviewers to check that I'm representing the job properly and the science properly. And WISE are actually more than happy to work with schools. And I think they're probably similar organisations all over the world. And because they want to raise the profile of STEM in schools as well. So perhaps find an organisation like this to get in touch with if you can. WISE do a lot of work on gender parity in STEM. And they have a lot of stats that I use in the author visits that I make to schools. So when I go, I take a box of costumes with me for children to dress up in. And I've got 6 costumes to match the first 6 Tarabins books that I wrote. So pilot, doctor, engineer, scientist, astronaut, and paleontologist. And I always pick 3 girls and 3 boys to come up in front of the class, to put these costumes on. And then I asked the class what percentage of, say, pilots did they think were women, and they were really often surprised. So I present the figures to them in what I try to make a very visual way. So I would say something like, if all of you in this class of 30 were engineers, then only 3 of you would be girls. Or if all of you were pilots, then only 1.5 of you would be girls. But of course, if you were doctors, about half of you would be girls, which is what you are. And then we talk about why that might be. So perhaps that's, a suggestion for another class activity is, maybe highlight this disparity and get children to examine their own views on gender and strength and, cleverness and knowledge and role models or jobs that your parents do. And it's kind of a way of using STEM as a route to talking about equality and perceptions of ourselves and the things that influence us. So, perhaps for older children, that might be another activity. Just to go back to books for a moment, not my books, but another mini-series in the Big Cat scheme, which is Shinoy and the Chaos Crew, written by Chris Callahan and Zoe Clark. So each time Shinoy, he's a boy who's faced with problems in the real world, like gravity being too strong, or rain falling upwards, or time freezing. And then he uses an app on his phone to summon some friends to help him with the problem. And there are fiction books within this mini series, but also graphic novels and non-fiction books. And the non-fiction ones pair with the fiction. So, for example, the daytime froze pairs with the non-fiction book, What is Time? So these direct links are made between fiction and non-fiction. So maybe children could use these use the pair of books, perhaps act out a scene where they've imagined one of these scenarios. Say, for example, if gravity was too strong, add in a bit of script writing. They can think about staging or props, or how to communicate that science in a mini scene. Maybe turn it into an assembly. It's usually a good way to check if you understand something yourself, is to try to explain it to somebody else. So a bit like the why presentation that I was talking about earlier on. One more idea. I'm nearly at the end. Don't worry, I'm nearly at the end. But another writing task that I walk children through when I do school visits is how I write one of my Tara Binns books. And this is, perhaps a STEM-based literacy idea that if you wanted to, you could do. And I talk about my story roller coaster as a way of planning a story. I work out what job she's going to do, then I decide what the highs and lows are going to be, what are the particular STEM related challenges of that job, what are the problems going to be, what's the success or the reward at the end. This is the one that I use to illustrate the storyline of Daring Diver. So she finds herself in the sea, and then there are sharks. That's really bad. Then her friends turn up. Then she discovers a leaking fuel can that's polluting the sea. Tries to tie the fuel cans together to tie them to the surface. The rope breaks. Her air runs out. And I think it's. You won't necessarily have time to write the story, but just that act of planning a story and making sure you have beginning, middle, and end is a useful exercise in itself, and it helps children, learn that that's how you approach writing and how you approach these things. So then I show them how that plan got all the way to being in the final book. So it's sort of, I'm just trying to show the process as well. And I'll finish with a final activity that links STEM and creative writing, and that is the Collins Big Cat Writing Competition, which just launched. The theme this year is celebrating science, and so we're really hoping lots and lots of children will be inspired to send in an entry, trying to encourage them to write about what interests them or fascinates them about science. It can be any aspect of science at all. It can be a poem, a letter, a script, a story, anything, a magazine article, whatever they want to do, whatever inspires them to sort of get stuck into something sciencey. And I've been asked to be one of the judges, and I'm really, really looking forward to reading all these entries to see, just to get that little insight into the spark in their minds. That's the end of my presentation. I'll leave this slide up. It's got the QR code on it to take you to the website. The web address is also there. With how to enter, a bit more information about it. It would be really, really good to receive as many entries as possible. So thank you very much. I hope you found what I've said useful. I hope I didn't rattle through too quickly. And I hope I've given just a few ideas of how to perhaps inject a bit more STEM into school life and the classroom, and get more children interested. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. That was fantastic. There's so many ideas there that are brilliant to implement in the classroom, and I bet are going to be a lot of fun for teachers to get involved with here. Just to reiterate again what Lisa said, so we've got the Big Cat Writing Competition for celebrating science, and there are so many different ways that your pupils can kind of get involved with this in a creative writing way. So I guess another idea of how you can implement STEM into the classroom as well. So these have also got ready-made lesson plans for you to sort of be ready to go and have a plan for how you'd like to teach with it for creative writing, as well as that to inspire that love of STEM and science and maths too. There's also some recommended readers there too, so if you did want to find out more, you can scan the QR code on this page, and then I believe my colleague Emanuela, who's in the back office here, will be able to post the link in the chat for you to click on and have a little look. So the competition is now open, and it will give you all the full details on there about how you can submit your creative writing pieces from your students on there as well. So I will leave you that to have a little look around with. And for now, we're going to move on to some Q&As, so some questions. So we've got one that's come in the Q&A box here, to say, thank you, Lisa, for this inspiring webinar, which is brilliant to hear. I like the idea of starting with things that children are already familiar with to spark their curiosity. When is the best time to gradually introduce these science theories or the theory behind the curiosity and excitement? Are there any sort of ages that you think that would be best for? I think maybe sort of those older Key Stage 2 for that theory drilling down. I
think probably, I don't know, I'm not an expert. And I think you will know better than I do, but you can kind of get a feel of kids of whether they want to delve into a bit more of the science behind it. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of minded to just keep it fun for as long as possible, but obviously you do need to explain it to them. I think that's a really, really tough question, actually, because
I guess if there's
some children are interested and some are not, and you just,
yeah,
I think where I'm coming from is just try and keep it fun as long as possible.
Absolutely.
There are children at the sort of periphery who can very easily be switched off, but could also very easily be kept going just long enough for them to start to get the rewards of the satisfaction of understanding.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, maybe taking a look at your syllabus or your curriculum or teacher guides as well for what you should be covered in those years and those age groups too, and then using Lisa's ideas that she said today to really spark that fun and that excitement too. So it's really, your class better than anyone else and your pupils better than anyone else, so it's what's going to get that excitement and inspire them, as well as going through what the elements are that you need to teach within science, maths, technology, and even engineering. You never know, there could be a few engineering classes to be had for those primary ages too. So brilliant. Okay, so that is our first question, and then we do have another one as well, which this is a personal one from me, so I hope you don't mind me asking this, Lisa, but I was going to ask, do you have a favourite Tara or Dani Binns book?
I do have. I love all of them. They tend to be my favourite while I'm working on them, while I'm writing on them, but hand on heart, my favourite is the detective Tarabins book. Mainly because as a child I loved mystery stories and sort of crime detective books, and I've always wanted to write something where the clues are there all along in plain sight, but you didn't realize, but then you can go back and find them. So I think the detective is my favourite. And also because part of me always wanted to be a forensic scientist or a CSI, and I never did it. And for Dani Binns, I think it's probably the architect book, which is actually in that slide, because it involves a lot of problem solving and turning something on its head, and looking at things from a different angle. So I really enjoyed that, and I love the illustrations in that one. I can't lie. I mean, I love all of the illustrations, but that one, I just think they look
that one in particular.
really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's so many careers that young children haven't, been necessarily open to unless they've, read about it or seen it on the TV or been open to it a bit more. So having the books that there's an interest in something for science and maths, that actually I can do that as a career, I can do that as an adult. That's pretty fun to connect that up as well, and keep that love and inspiration of STEM going as well. So yeah, absolutely. And then we do have another question that's come in as to how would I enter into the competition. So it would be to sort of collect up the responses of your pupils of whatever they would decide to do and whatever they would like to do, and then you can click on the link that Emmanuela, my colleague, has posted in the chat, or follow the QR code that's on the screen there, and you can go through all the stages there of how you would submit your entries as well. And I know Lisa's really looking forward to reading these as well. And yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing the winner as well. It's real creative freedom for whatever your pupils want to do for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 for those lower primary and upper primary years as well. Brilliant. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. So it is, so why do you pick STEM for jobs within the Tara and Dani Binns series?
The reason I focus on STEM is I'm a little bit of a repressed scientist myself. And I think, like, I tried my hand at science and it didn't work out for me, but I keep coming back to it, and I deeply love it. I love that satisfaction of understanding something. And so when I started writing the Tarabins books, it was initially about showing girls doing jobs, basically. I wanted to find the equivalent of Bob the Builder and Fireman Sam for my daughter, and I couldn't find books with girls taking the lead or girls saving the day and getting the job done. So I wrote them myself, and then I found I was steering towards sciencey things or engineering, but also because I think it's important that girls don't rule out science from an early age, and so I was always trying to link them into imagination and creativity and curiosity rather than make them full-on sciencey, because those are the actual skills and the actual character traits that are involved. So it did start out as a bit of a mission for me, for inspiring girls, basically. But having read the books in lots and lots of schools now, I've realised that I get just as much interest off boys, and they're just as keen to see what the inside of a cockpit looks like, or a factory, or what it might be like to be on the moon. And I enjoy seeing that spark. I basically enjoy seeing that spark. So I've got my little sciencey mission going on in the background, but it's just that little light going on that really drives me, basically.
Absolutely. And hopefully for everyone else listening here today as well, to inspire those budding young astronauts and mathematicians among us and the engineers. So yeah, thank you so much. Just to say, I think that's all we've got time for questions, but if you do have any more questions that you'd like to ask, then do feel free to email us at collins.international@harpercollins.co.uk, and we'll be able to answer those, or ask Lisa, and we can get the answers for those for you.